Hello. So tonight, our talk is with the wonderful Ed Byrne. My name is Michael O'Kane. I am the chairperson of Humanism Ireland. I welcome you all to our chat this evening. And before introducing you correctly and formally and properly to our guest Ed, some small comment on the format. We've already began recording for our social media. Afterwards, we'll ask our kind guest for permission on that. When we always make sure that we're mindful of everybody who's attended as an audience across the chat. And we ask that you keep your audio muted until we've spoken and chatted with Ed. And then we'll have a Q&A section and session where, like always, if you raise your digital Zoom hand, we'll get you to directly say hi and ask a question. Now, just a few small words on humanism. Humanism is a simple philosophy. It's an ethical life stance which focuses on human values, being good without God. And if you would like to know more or have a more in-depth description, the statement of the fundamental principles of modern humanism, otherwise known as the Amsterdam Declaration, is available online, and you can also see it on our website, humanism.ie. So, as for this evening, we are delighted to take part in the Smashing Times Art and Human Rights Festival. And in this special talk this evening, our guest, Ed Byrne, will share his unique perspective on everything, on humanism, and drawing on his decade-long career in comedy, television, and performance, from exploring morality, atheism, and kindness to reflecting on human rights and creativity. And we hope Dara O'Brien isn't in the audience because sometimes Ed and Dara can go off in a completely different tangent. But if Dara's here too, great. It'll be even more fun. But we're assured that Ed will bring, his warmth and wit and insight into our discussions this evening. And what can we say about Ed Byrne? He has risen to prominence from the 1990s when he started off studying horticulture has become a fixture on the global world and comedy circuit, earning widespread acclaim with his hit Edinburgh Fringe shows. He has appeared on many television programs such as Mock the Week, Have I Got News for You, and has been in Live at the Apollo. And in Ireland, he's been on The Panel and a guest on The Late Late Show, Tommy Tiernan Show, and also The Ray D'Arcy Show and The Den. His comedy reflects everyday life, relationships, modern absurdities with warmth and intelligence. And his signature style is light-hearted observations and generally inclusive. And when he has spoken in stand-up or on panel shows about atheism, it is usually to highlight contradictions, poking fun at interpretation of fate, morality, and science. And Ed is also a patron of Humanist UK. He distinguishes humanism from atheism, saying you can be an evil atheist. Humanism is about striving to be good without belief in a supernatural being. There's many more things we can comment on, but I'd rather we go straight to the man himself. Hello, Ed, and welcome to our Humanist evening chat.
Hello, Michael. Thank you for having me. I was cringing uncomfortably through most of that description of that little run through of everything I've done. I was just going, let's just have a chat. Please stop telling them
Exactly,
about me.
exactly. And I don't giving everything away. So this is like almost feel like this is your life to a point
No.
there. But let's hope we can get to you and your life. So look, actually,
Mm,
the first question,
yeah.
what about like let's go back and bring it back to Ed Byrne living in Dublin in Swords, I
Yeah.
believe, and maybe kind of give us a bit about what began to shape you from that point period in your life.
Um, I suppose first of all, growing up, as a small boy, I was an altar boy. I think that's probably something that would inform my worldview and view of, things religious and non-religious. I was an altar boy, partly because I did actually initially believe in all of that, but also because it was a wonderful opportunity to be a pillar of your community before you even, had pubes.
Yeah, I
Uh,
was one myself. Yeah, I,
you
I
know,
know exactly what you're talking about.
it was an excellent, it was built-in respect.
Yeah,
Um, and also, as you got older, you could bunk off classes if you were doing the 9 o'clock in the morning
yeah, yeah,
mass
10
during the
o'clock.
week. That
10
was
o'clock
always
for
a handy
me.
one.
That was it. Yeah.
Yeah, I was actually pretty good. One of the sometimes you show up and you're the only altar boy there, and you'd
Yeah.
have to do you, you're a one man band, and it was quite impressive, because you have to go up, you have to start on one side of the altar, go and get the offered the gifts, and then go to the other side, and then finger bowl and back just in time to ding a ling a ling, and then back up with it, and it was people would be you come out after that and with a sweat on you, and people would be like,
Yeah.
kudos. Still never got a tip. So there was that. Also, I grew up growing up in Swords was is now a very large town in North County Dublin. But when I was growing up, I was born in the 70s. It was actually quite small. My house used to back onto a farm, and it really felt, even though it was about an hour on the bus to get into Dublin, it felt like it was the middle of nowhere. That was my memory of it growing up. So I think those two things of just feeling near the city, but not near enough to it, and I went to a Christian Brothers school, which also I would say colored my view of religion, and more importantly of the religious, because if there's one thing a Christian Brothers school will teach you, is that just because somebody is a man of the cloth does not mean they are a nice or good person.
Yeah. That's how you kind of began looking at the world and religion per se.
Yeah, and
Uh,
I wouldn't say I was that critical of it even then.
yeah.
I joke that I lost religion very early on. I used to tell a joke that I was 12 when I noticed that they had installed a lightning conductor on the church. And that was me. I go, well, what a great lack of faith you're displaying then,
Yeah.
What an architecturally picky God that he would choose to just knock down a building built in his honor. Um, but I didn't really start to to really look at the whole thing critically until until I left, until I was at college. I was 18, and I just was meeting more people from outside of Dublin, outside of Swords, and it suddenly, I don't know, it felt like in my late teens, early 20s, that the scales just fell away. And it was interesting because you talk to a lot of people. I went to college in Glasgow, and then I moved to London to be a comedian. So I've lived in the UK since I was 18. By and large, the Church of England, religion is considered in the UK quite a benign sort of
Yeah.
thing. It's more of an organizer of bring and buy sales and the like. And so a lot of the time, people, when you then decide to join an organization like Humanism, when you become a staunch card carrying atheist, people kind of wonder why.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that a lot of people I met who did, you know get involved in humanism as an organization or get involved in campaigning. A lot of the time they had Catholic upbringings, because a lot of people, like, even if they used to be sort of Church of England, then they kind of just like, they don't see what the big deal is, basically, because there isn't the same, I would say, interference in everyday life as there was with the church. And I look back a lot on growing up with a lot of resentment on the time wasted, just spent on this thing that wasn't true, and the extent to which you are told that it is. The fact that the same person in your classroom who told you from the time you were 4 years old what the Irish for mother was, and what the capital of France is, and how to conjugate these verbs, and how to multiply this, and your times table, all that, that same person who told you all that also told you and this guy died for your sins, and Mary was this, and all that. And it's, you know, it's just, I don't, it just seems fundamentally wrong to me
Yeah.
to, I'm not going to go as far as to use terms like brainwashing, but it's fundamentally wrong to me to have those two things presented in exactly the same factual way.
Yeah, because like when we were talking before we got ready for this evening, and we talked about like you kind of said this it's a very standard type of upbringing, right? You were in Swords, you were an altar boy, then you went through school, and then okay, next thing you're in Glasgow, or you're in college, and then you're looking at stand up. But was there a particular moment along any of those stages? um, that kind of solidified you looking at like thinking about what's the other area out there, atheism and humanism. Like, was there a moment in that journey that kind of solidified something about
Um, no, I think some of the more formative things was that I do remember once I became more and more determined that I didn't believe in a higher power, was remembering the people who I had seen in the media who also spoke about it. So one of the first people I ever saw on TV talking about being an atheist and standing up for atheism was Alan Carron, and I remember him because I remember being quite young and hearing him talk, and at the time I still believed in God, but I remember thinking how reasonable this guy was. Because remember, as I grew up thinking even Protestants were going to hell, let alone atheists. So the idea that anybody wasn't a Catholic and could still be good was kind of into me that was just, that only Catholics were good and everybody else was bad. So seeing somebody who's an outspoken atheist on TV talking about it and being really reasonable and putting forward as bearing in mind I still believe in God at this point, but putting forward a really strong point, which was when you think about it, it's really only atheists that are inherently good, because if an atheist is being good, it's for no reason. Whereas if a believer is being good, it could just be because they're doing it for the payoff at the end, for the afterlife credit, or even if it's a belief in karma or anything like that, it's still you're still, when you think about it, it's a transactional desire to be good.
that? Yeah,
Whereas if somebody has no belief whatsoever, aren't they then, in theory, actually perhaps a better person? And I had that blew my mind. And I might even be overthinking exactly what the guy said. He might have only said a couple of sentences, and I've imbued it with a lot more, logical sort of coherency than that. But it's
yeah,
I remember that as being quite a light bulb moment.
yeah. Because in the show Pilgrimage, which I looked at, one of the panel or the people there was talking about, well, religious people are sinners, and then they go to church because they're looking for sort of forgiveness from that person. Whereas, so where does kind of
Mm.
where's the flip side to atheists and humans? Who do they um, ask for forgiveness from? It's just themselves. Because you spoke about humanism again being more than atheism, and what's led you to that distinction?
Well, I mean, atheism isn't anything. Atheism is just a belief that there is no God, which is, that on its own, and it's one of those things that believers also, for some reason, have this thing of having to, if you say that you're an atheist or let that slip, it's one of those things that people love to argue with you about and go, well, really, when you think about it, actually, what you are, all you are is an agnostic. And going, okay, fine, have a cookie, well done, it's just. But the difference is that a humanist believes, I think, is that one not just can, but one should live a good life. That just because you don't believe that there's a higher power doesn't mean that that's not a reason to try and be the best person you can be. If anything, it's more of a reason because there's only one life and you should live it as well as you can. We are all in this together, and it's kind of, I guess, it's the opposite to that extreme view of Christianity, which is kill them all, let God sort it out. You know, that that is. I know that's just a phrase, but it is a phrase people do, have used. And when you think it's a phrase that when it boils down, people kind of believe it in the back of their minds. People are not actually suggesting kill everybody and let it sort out, but people do have an attitude, if they are believers, that justice will be done eventually, and probably in the next life. And I don't think that's good enough.
Yeah.
I think, we should try and live as good a life as we can here now in this one, the only one that we've got. And so I think that's why you have more of a reason to live as good a life as you can, because it's all we have. Sorry, that was a lot. I should really work on having a snappier answer to that question.
Fine. I'm enjoying it, as I'm sure, well, hopefully everybody else is. But so look, I mean, because okay, I mean, it's an honor, to be here in front of you, and because like, I'm a big fan. But like comedy and comedians, right?
Yeah.
We sort of touched on it a little bit about. There's sometimes like often atheists or critical of religion, as somebody once said, which I quote you before we come on. You went, and doubt is the kernel of both atheism and comedy. And like,
where did that quote come from again?
I'll tell you. But like, so like, we're kind of comedy and looking at religion and being critical. Right? Why is it such a thing?
Yeah, it is a curious thing, and I think what it is, certainly for me anyway, a lot of comedy, and certainly mine, is a lot of it's about applying a rigorous, almost Vulcan level of logic to things that actually don't really stand up to scrutiny. And whether that is the lyrics of a song, like song lyrics are and as someone who made his name slagging off Alanis Morissette's misuse of ironic, song lyrics are kind of easy game because they're not designed to be listened to divorced from the music, and they oftentimes don't make a great deal of sense, but they lend themselves to being slagged off. And the way we behave in everyday life, we all as humans behave in a way that's maybe not 100% logical, whatever it may be. Our silly behaviors, our ideal sort of, Rich seems to mind when it comes to comedy, because it's that thing of why do we do that? Why do we this, that, and the other? And these are this is how observational comedy has worked for forever. Religion is a textbook example of that. It's full of contradiction. Christianity certainly is full of contradictions, and it's full of stuff that doesn't bear scrutiny. So it just lends itself to the kind of comedy that I write. So that's why I don't do it so much anymore. I went through a phase where I had a bunch of jokes about about God or about religion, and I remember getting asked about it as to why I would do it. Because bearing in mind it could offend people, but part of the reason is that comedy, a lot of the time, you need a frame of reference, a common frame of reference. So making fun of an ad on the TV, making fun of a major a pop culture thing like Riverdance or the Eurovision or something like that. These are communal experiences, and so people understand what you're talking about when you slag it off. It's actually slightly harder to do these days because there's very few things that we've all watched and all experienced. But religion is still one of them. Christianity particularly is, for the majority of the people coming to my shows, they know what I'm talking about if I make a joke about Jesus. People aren't going to go, who does he mean? So I think it's the communal, the touchstone makes it a reference that I know will work. So one of the ones I had was I talking about first impressions really last. You've got to be careful with your first impression because it's very easy to get pigeonholed as you're the guy. That at the crucifixion, there was people in that crowd going, isn't that the carpenter who made a fucking Hames of your wardrobe? like that. And that, to me, that's just a funny. I don't now. I had to defend that one to people who've said that it offends their religious sensibilities, but I don't think that's a particularly egregious one. You know.
I mean, like, do you think comedy has a like any type of moral responsibility, like to challenge like the religious dogma, or I mean, and then how do you balance like because I saw in one of those shows you did as well where there was obviously people you make it a joke but people are offended. So how do you balance kind of looking at it, challenging it, being provocative, but maybe sort of being somewhat respectful?
Well, yes, I understand the desire to be respectful. I think where you cross a line is when you suggest harm should come to followers of a religion just because they follow the religion. But I think making fun of the religion should be separate from that.
Hmm.
The one thing I would say, and this is another classic thing that Christians will come back at you on, is that if you make fun of Christianity, the classic really quite boring knee-jerk comeback is, I wouldn't see you saying that about Islam. I wouldn't see you saying that about the Jews. And it's a very tedious response. But the reason for that is very simple. I did not grow up Muslim or Jewish. Yeah. I grew up a Christian, a Catholic to be specific. So that was if I slag that off, I am not having a go at, I'm coming at it from an informed perspective. You may be offended on behalf of Christianity if you like, but you know that I'm not attacking Catholics as a people because I was one. I am in that weird pigeonhole of atheist, but politically speaking, a Catholic. You know what I mean? So if I feel that attacking Islam as a religion is something that should be done by people who are brought up with Islam as their religion. I think attacking Judaism should be done by people who were brought up in the Jewish faith. I think I think we should kind of stay in our own lane when it comes to attacking our religions. To my mind, and for the exact same reason that there's a black person, Chris Rock can make jokes about black people that I can't make. You know what I mean? It's just it's just more about staying in your lane. Yeah. But a lot of people take it as an assumption that it's okay to slag off. It's okay to slag off Christianity, but it's not okay to slag off Islam. And I don't agree with that. I just say that from my perspective, I'm taking issue with the thing I grew up with because I don't actually care or know a great deal about any others.
And is that kind of like because maybe comedians are innately skeptical, like of there's a lot of skepticism about, and then you're also very critical thinkers, right? So kind of how do you mash in, like that when you're looking at like religion and being skeptical of it, and then also you have like freedom of speech, right? Maybe comedians think they have they're free to challenge like the taboos. So that
well,
kind
exactly, because I think the fact that we didn't used to be able to, and also comedy a lot of the time is, it sounds very cliched, but it's about saying the unsayable, and that could be, it could just be, a lot of the time it is just a case of standing on stage and talking about slightly taboo subjects. And if you think about it, compared to what we get away with now, compared to what we used to, talking about sex, even just talking about, things lavatorial, or talking about, behavior in relationships, anything like, bodily functions, things like that. In theory, you're talking about the kind of stuff people don't talk about in polite conversation. And that's part of what a lot of comedy is. The reason why it's funny is if it's a little bit edgy or it's a little bit shocking, it's just a little bit you're standing up and you're talking frankly about things that people generally perhaps avoid in polite conversation, and religion would absolutely 100% be one of those things. So going, but also I think, and maybe less so now, I think there was, because I've been around long enough that making fun of religion used to be a thing you just couldn't do. I mean, Tommy Tiernan did a whole show at the Edinburgh Fringe in 1998 about a routine he did in the Late Late Show and the trouble he got into for it. And it was massively successful. I remember it because he won the Perrier that year and I was only nominated. So that one sticks in my head, that particular show. But the point is, he was, you know, and in America, you know, it was, believe it or not, in a lot of comedy clubs across America, like the fact that you can't even say "God damn" on network television anyway. Still, you can't take Jesus' name in vain. You can't say "God damn" on network television. You know, there's still raps on what we can and can't say. But certainly in the 90s, we were just, I mean, Jesus, Life of Brian, you know, had only come out, you know, a decade earlier and was banned. That kind of stuff. So, I feel like talking about religion and having a pop at it certainly felt, you know, when I was first doing it, like you were being a bit taboo. Like you were talking about stuff that had occurred to people, but they hadn't felt that they could say out loud, and people certainly didn't feel that they could get on stage and say out loud. I would say that is less so now. I feel we have passed through that, and I think making fun of religion isn't particularly edgy anymore. I think it's almost hack already. But
I mean, maybe like there was also bits of like we're in personal trauma, right? Religion and like, you know, and then disillusionment with religious institutions, I suppose, kind of like maybe was the fuel, right? The fueled like that sort of satire. But I guess, you know, you as an intellectual sort of approach to looking at and your curiosity, and like you've already said it, but looking at religion now and Ireland, uh, Ireland's relationship with religion, and like, how do you think that, like, you know, what are the things that have changed since, like, when you were here, like Swords?
I would say it's vastly improved. It doesn't have anything like the holdover people it used to have. Because I look back on my childhood, as I'm 53, sometimes it's insane, the stuff that we did. Like I was on a podcast recently called Scarred for Life. It's about formative, scary things you saw as a kid. I talked about, I saw the Alien movie too young. I talked about an episode of Buck Rogers in the 25th century that featured a space vampire called the Vorvon. I talked about all this kind of stuff. But I told the guys about a thing that they had no knowledge of until I told them about it, which was the silent scream. Do you know what I'm talking about, Michael, when I use the term the silent scream? How old are you, Michael?
50.
Oh, did you not get? Did you go to Christian Brothers?
I kind of did it was Christian Brother run school, but not dominated by them. So we had a mixture. In fact, I was in Darrell Breen's school, Closhstone. So
okay, right.
So it was a mix of kind of Republican everything and all sorts.
I'm sure he saw it. The Silent Scream was a propaganda movie that was made in the States in the late 70s, early 80s that got shown, and it was shown in schools over here. It purported to be an ultrasound of an abortion. That's what it was. It was, I think, a 15, 20-minute film. And they showed it to us in class. And there's like a moment in it where the fetus appears to be trying to get away from the instruments as this fetus is ripped apart and dismembered by forceps and all that, right? And it's doctored. It's sped up and slowed down to make it look like the child is fighting for its life. Now, whatever one's view on choice versus pro-life, pro-choice, it was a horrendous thing to show to a bunch of 13-year-old boys, none of whom would ever have to personally make this choice. Yeah. In a country that like even 50 years later, 40 years later, still, you know, you're not actually able to get an abortion yet, right? It wasn't even on the table. The conversation wasn't even being had. And yet we're being shown this absolute propaganda, like a horrific propaganda movie. And that was just something that happened. And it was like, oh, what year are you in? Oh, first year, oh, you'll be watching Sunscreen then, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
it was utterly bizarre that. So I would say, when you talk about how things have changed, that doesn't happen anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. So like, yeah. So and so kind of like, what
I
else
would
do
be
you feel?
curious when we do go to questions. Sorry, I would be curious when we go to questions from people in the room.
Oh, yeah.
How many
Yeah.
people have heard of the thing that
Hands
I'm
up.
talking about there?
You could do a poll.
I'd love to get a hands up on who's heard of the sound scream and who
Well,
hasn't.
yeah, I'm sure it'll come up
Hmm.
when we open up the mics for everybody. Yeah. So like I mean, like here's kind of a curveball. I mean, so you've kind of you comedy around religion. Do you look at comedy then in terms of atheism and humanism? Like, have you kind of got that sort of look? Have you
Um,
assessed that?
I've always just tried to, whatever my opinion is on anything, I'll think about it and go, can I find a way to make my opinion funny? And whatever my opinion is, whether it's political, secular, religious, whatever it is, I just try and make my opinion funny. And as I say, I have in the past brought my feelings about religion into it. I had a routine actually about agnostics. I remember I had a sort of slagging off agnostics, just because it's a ridiculous thing for people to for atheists to care about the distinction. But I just had a thing uh about just saying, if you're young and you're agnostic, if you haven't made up your mind, that's absolutely fine. But if you're my age, like at the time I was in my 40s, if you're in your 40s and you haven't decided if there's a God or not, get off the fucking fence. Come on, what are you waiting for? Allah is not going to jump out of your side salad and knock the fucking pork chop out of your hand.
Yeah.
Just come on.
Yeah.
Just, what do you think? It was just about. It was a silly routine. It was, to me, it was just about the idea, just the namby-pamby of still keeping the door open. I was actually being quite unreasonable, really. But that's what I thought was quite kind of funny about it. But
Yeah.
occasionally you get people who would be offended by that. People who weren't religious, but people who were agnostic and didn't like being told, "Come on, either go be religious or come and join the anti-religion brigade." You know.
Loonies, yeah. Like so, you're a patron of Humanist UK.
Yeah.
We told you a little bit about Humanist Association of Ireland and what we're trying to be and do and what we've been involved in. And like, what role does like Humanist UK and Humanism Ireland play, like in your opinion, in society? Like, do should people care about these types of associations? Should we be curious about them? I mean, why have you looked at the
Mm.
Humanist UK group
Yeah.
and because that and the kind of we should glean from that about ourselves, because we're pretty small. We told you we're about 900 members, so like kind of what's your views on because the mammoths of the church, and the
Mhm.
centuries of membership, right? And we don't have such longevity and legacy. So kind
Yeah.
of how can associations like ours mm, be of any relevance to anybody?
So the joining a group is an interesting thing, and I get it back when I used to get involved with arguments online, which I just don't anymore, partly because the social media platforms I used to favor are overrun with awful people now. Um, I mean, they always were, but now
Yeah.
it seems like they're the only ones anybody listens to. Anyway, it's it's an argument I hear a lot: is why join a group? I literally had a guy say to me one time, the reason I became an atheist is because I didn't want to join a group, which to me seems, as I said, to him, a very shallow reason to become an atheist. My problem with organized religion is not the organization bit. It's, um, what a group like the Humanist UK and or the Secular Society or all these people do. Uh, I think one of the most important things with humanists is they provide resources for people to have humanist ceremonies. So part of the one of the reasons that I think religion has managed to retain its hold over people to the extent that it has is because it has completely invaded. Maybe invaded is a strong term, but it almost has a monopoly on the rights that we all have in life. So people want to have a party when they have a baby. They want to have a thing when that baby reaches a certain age. They want to have a shindig when they meet somebody that they decide to want to be with for the rest of their life. And then we also all want to have a shindig for when somebody dies. And religion has completely dominated the way we celebrate all of these things. But it's like in every culture all over the world and in every religion, they have these rights. So these are an inbuilt thing in humans that we want to celebrate publicly. And that's why they become religious ceremonies, as far as I'm concerned, And the desire to do these things without religion being involved is something that somebody like Humanist UK provides resources for. So to have a humanist funeral, a humanist wedding ceremony, a humanist naming ceremony, the only thing the only thing we don't have there isn't an alternative. There is no secular alternative to the confirmation or the bar mitzvah. Americans have the Sweet 16 birthday party, I guess, which always just seems a bit, I don't know, creepy. Maybe it's just the name is creepy, yeah. But you know what I mean. The desire to have these parties, they're built in us to want to get together as a community, and do these things, and it's hard to do them without going into a church, and partly because the church has made it hard to do them. I mean, sometimes when people say, why should I join an organization that campaigns for atheists and stuff like that? It's like, well, where did you get married? In a hotel. You could only get married in a hotel because of the work that was done previously by secular campaigners. You used to be able to get married anywhere other than a church. You couldn't have a funeral anywhere other than a church. The fact that you can do these things now outside of religious buildings is as a result of campaigning by organizations. And so that's to me, that's the main reason. Yeah. Then there's also, then there's the political campaigning to sort of, again, here in the UK, and I know because you were telling me, Michael, that you're slightly hamstrung in this in Ireland, but having the chair of Humanist UK is these days gets invited to a lot of the meetings and chats that previously were completely dominated by the heads of various religions.
And we're getting
a secular voice across.
Yeah, we're getting that. We're able to be at those events as well now too.
Yeah. But you were saying that you, I don't know if I thought most interesting when we were chatting before we were actually on air was that because you can now have humanist celebrants in Ireland, that by being ordained as being able to be celebrants of marriage, you can legally marry people. You had to give up the ability to politically campaign.
Yeah, but we can still attend events like that where they bring in the heads of they're actually bringing us in more, and to be represented at kind of discussion level, right? And so,
which I think is a great thing. So I think that's a real advance, and that's a real reason for organizations like this to exist, because it's going to take a very long time. But religion is it just has it's in the DNA of society, and it has a hold over everything that we do. Really, here in the UK, you've got the House of Lords has a whole block of people who are just there by dint of their how high they've risen through their respective churches. To me, that's fundamentally undemocratic. Little things like if you're going up before a parole board, they will use the fact that you found God in prison, or the fact that you are a good Christian or whatever, as evidence that you should be, released. And to me, that is fundamentally wrong.
yeah. No,
So,
there's
so
definitely some changes happening. Yeah, I sort of threw it at you before we come on, and like we haven't got your answer to it, but like kind of thinking of like yourself and Dara Breen, but then looking at Stephen Fry, and I thought of Gay Byrne and that
yeah,
meaning of life episode, where there was like gay said, "So it's all true." You walk up to pearly gates, and I confronted
yeah.
my God. Um,
What do you say to him?
quickly, what would Edward say to him?
Yeah,
And then, or him, or her, or it.
yeah.
Okay, and then maybe let's get to the audience to see how we're doing. So, what would
I
Ed
don't
say?
know. What would I say? I think I'd say, my ma used to believe in you, and then you put her through so much shit, she doesn't anymore. So well done. I think that would probably be. I'd have to say
that's
something. Yeah,
that'll be the
something
start.
quite spiteful.
Okay, right. Okay, we've lots of people listening, and I can see. Like as we said, we'd like to get people's input and see if there's any questions. So,
I'd
Megan,
like to know first of all, show of hands,
oh
who
yeah,
who remembers the silent scream?
there's one anyway. Two, very good. Uh, excellent.
Only two people.
We're probably more, but they're just sometimes they're a bit shy. If maybe wait to see what kind of um sort of answers and questions are. But anyway, Megan,
Right,
am I okay for you to
of course.
please bring in our audience?
Yeah, of course. So if anybody has a question that they'd like to ask, just raise your hand and I'll say your name and you can unmute yourself. So Michelle, you were in first if you want to unmute yourself.
Hi Ed, thank
Hi,
you
Michelle.
very much for joining. Really, really brilliant. I went to very Catholic school. I don't remember Silent Scream. It's a horrific thing to have done to you. I'm so sorry about that. I suppose I wanted to ask you, like, I think, to me, I think that one of our main problems here is the kind of the grip of the church on our education system, and the complete intransigence of our government in it's not in their interest at all to take action on it. Do you have any tips from Humanism UK really about campaigning? I mean, there's a great group called Education Equality campaigning on this, but it's absolutely like the human rights of, whilst they are there in writing, of children not to be indoctrinated essentially day long in our schools, are not being enforced at all in any way. So I mean, it's something that we've looked at as an organisation. But if you have any sort of ideas about how we can raise up a campaign, I mean, with perhaps personality, whatever.
Yeah, I mean, I don't, I know exactly what you're talking about with, I mean, it's hard enough here still in what is considered a far more secular society to find a school that's not even even in a small way religious. My cousin who was in Dublin had to move to Wexford, I think it was, to get their kids into uh, a non-denominational school. The Educate Together
Yeah,
group is, which,
multi-denominational.
oh, fine. Sorry,
We won't be
you're right.
having any of that non-denominational here. Where do you think you are, Ed?
Oh, sorry. Been living here too long. Notions. Uh, but yeah, there's clearly a long way to go in it. I think with all of these things, I think you shouldn't underestimate the power of having those conversations, those difficult conversations, just with your own family, with people. People often tend to try and avoid this topic of conversation, but it's incredible how much you can do by just when you're over there at your families who don't care, who don't think it's a big deal, and just putting forward the reason why it is a big deal to just your friends and family every day. Maybe eventually you'll not get invited anymore because one who always brings up this subject, but I think it's as much as trying to affect change through campaigning, by going out on the streets with signs. I think that just talking to your nearest and dearest about why this is important and what they can do is goes a lot further than people think. But I absolutely agree with you, Michelle, that Ireland compared to the UK is way behind on this, and the stranglehold on the education system is one of the reasons why I joined a humanist group in the first place.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you.
Sorry, I muted the wrong person. Ed, sorry, I muted you. I didn't mean to. Apologies.
You muted
Sorry.
me.
I'm so sorry.
That's a heckle and a half.
We're done now. No. Okay, well, who was next? Rosie, you were next, and then Dara. So Rosie, if you could unmute yourself, please.
Hiya. So you mentioned that movie. I haven't seen it. It sounds horrific, but I could actually see it as something that they play in America nowadays. Like in America, they've got so religious. I had a friend home there last week, and his brother was looking to move to Oklahoma, do a transfer with his job. And they're good atheists. Well, agnostic. We have a bit of a mix, view. But he went to look for about the job, and as point manager asked, "Which church will you be joining?" Not what. It's like which one, which church.
Yeah.
And my friend's brother quickly thought on his feet and said, "Oh, I'll have to discuss that with the wife.
Yeah.
I couldn't make such." But it's getting so religious. Over here, I have friends who say, "Oh, don't believe," but they will. They do the christening, they do the communion, they do the confirmation. And I'm like, "You don't believe?" But I know, but it's tradition. And are we, like, it just seems some of the places we're going backwards, not forward.
Well, I would say in a lot of aspects, while people think of Ireland as being very in the throes of religion, or very captured by religion, the United States is ridiculous in how much, particularly in a country that is supposed to constitutionally have a separation of church and state. The fact that you can see there's footage of Senate committee hearings on climate change where senators are quoting the Old Testament as proof that climate change isn't happening, because God did the flood once with Noah and the ark, and then he promised he'd never do it again. So that's all you need. And you shouldn't be able to make a statement like that in a governing body, in a law-making arena, without people calling into question your mental capacity to do the job. I genuinely believe that if you're somebody who is in a political position of power, and you answer a question or put forward a motion based on a Bible quote, or you say, if you're George Bush Jr. and you say the reason you went into Iraq was because God told you to, like the level of religious interference that is not just present but completely accepted, without people on the opposite bench going, "Hang on, sorry, did you just quote the Old Testament in a Senate hearing?" It to me, that is an insane thing to do. So absolutely, as much as bad as we are, at least we're not them. That's what I would say.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you very much. Just before we move on to Dara, there are a couple of people in the text. We have had some people saying, or in the comments saying, the film wasn't shown to us in Wales. Somebody else saying they're impressed that they showed it to teenage boys, so they might have been more respectful of girls. Michelle said it's a horrible thing to show children and young people. And then someone else says, I found it online when researching abortion. and had heard about how misleadingly edited it was. So you're having some responses down there, not necessarily with the
No,
thing. But
no,
to be fair, I just
people aren't
Googled it,
reminiscing
and
about it though, right?
I just Googled it, and oh my God, don't Google it.
Yeah, no, it is. It's because, as I say, when I was on that podcast about, traumatic. It was more about horror, really, but about the things that stayed with you from when you were a kid. And the two
Mm,
guys, yeah, they looked it up and could couldn't get to it. You know,
insane.
yeah.
Dara, you have a question now?
Yes, I do, Ed. Hi, how are you? I'm a great admirer
Hi,
of your work. And
thank you.
I heard you say you were born around the 70s, and around that time, I knew your mother, Jill.
Oh, no way.
Isn't that amazing? Yeah.
Right.
I remember your dad, Ed, worked in the airport. Was he in
That's
engineering,
correct.
I think?
Yeah, a
Yeah.
sheet metal worker. Yeah.
There you are now. And I knew Jill because Jill worked in St. Luke's Hospital as a radiation therapist
Yes.
with my wife, Mary,
Oh,
for
no
a
way.
couple of decades. And they
Oh,
did astounding work.
oh, Mary Hogan. Okay. Was she
That's
was she
her.
married? What was her maid?
Yeah, Mary Hogan. Mary
Yeah, right.
Gately before we married, and Mary
Okay.
Hogan now.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, hello. Nice to see you.
And also, there was a story around the hospital, Ed, that
Hmm.
when you went on the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, Jill also went on and regaled the crowd with stories about breastfeeding you. Is that true?
That was yeah. I had her on my show that I did in 2000 at the Playhouse.
There you
That
are.
and that she said that the reason I was so skinny is because she breastfed me, and after that, all food was a complete disappointment.
Well, look, well done. Don't stop now.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, if that isn't Ireland for you.
That's not a question, more of a I knew your ma.
Do
Exactly.
we have any other questions before we wrap up? I'm sure that we'd likely get going home soon enough, but I'm sure we have time for one or two more. Yeah, Fergus, if you want to unmute yourself.
Right. No, I just wanted to. I haven't been that long involved in the humanist thing at all, but I studied theology for 5 years. Was a deacon, and
Oh,
it was
wow.
for 6 months from ordination, and I it was over COVID. I just stopped going to mass, and I kind of never went back. But and I sort of thought about once I sort of thought everything through, like Ed was talking there about to look at it rationally. It was just nonsense. But I found more genuine Christian values in humanism than I've ever seen in the Catholic Church and in the Catholics themselves. But it was just an interesting sort of comparison, like I say, genuine goodness in humanist folks, and that's what I was just an interesting dichotomy there.
Hmm. Yeah. No, it is. It's true, and it's. I mean, anybody again who going to something like the Christian Brothers and getting the ones who would, even though it was against the law, but the ones that would cuff you around the ear the hardest were the brothers, and there was a couple of the brothers that were absolute bullies, like absolute psychopaths, knocking 13-year-old kids around because they could. And it was, I mean, I have to say, I also knew a couple of priests and stuff like that growing up who genuinely were rock solid, lovely
Uh,
people who absolutely just wanted everyone to get along and all that. But it was the automatic respect you had as it, once you wore that collar, despite what a horrible individual you could have been, and having seen what a horrible individual some of them were, that they would treat children in the way that they would treat them. Like, if that's how you treat children, like what kind of a person are you? I feel like that is just a massive part of what made me think, just question the whole thing, or just make me want to turn me back on the whole thing.
like
Yeah, yeah.
many thanks, Ed. Um, Neve, Larry, there. Hello.
I'm here. I'm here. Sorry, I'm muted. I have to say, I hope my little people don't disturb everybody because they have a tendency to run on screen when we have
Hey,
events
bring them in. Bring them in.
No. Ed, listen, lovely to see you again. Yeah, I suppose my question just because I followed you for a number of years, and I've always been interested, and I love comedy anyway. But I suppose I just wanted to ask you, as somebody, you know, on the circuit and even in your work when you're doing festivals and various different things, you know, given the kind of the way the world is now and this whole kind of cancel culture and, you know, how woke people are about different things, do you feel that there are certain things that you would find for yourself as the comedian that are off limits? You know, do you find yourself, you know, because I think, you know, comedians sometimes have that, I know we spoke about it recently, but they have that thing where they can kind of put a mirror up in front of people and make it humorous. But are there things that even you for yourself would find, okay, I might be going too far with that, or is there anything that's off limits to you?
Oh, I mean, I think all kinds of things can be off limits. I think that at your heart, it's not necessarily the subjects; it's how you tackle them,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that and again, a comedy is supposed to be about saying the unsayable, but I think you also do have to take a responsibility for the offense you may cause people, and I think I don't. Some people have this attitude of, and there's a lot of comedians now have this attitude of, you should be able to say anything you like on stage. You should be able to say, and it should be the raps are off, and comedians should have this special place in society where we're allowed to say or do anything, and no one's allowed to be offended. Now, I don't subscribe to that, and I actually think that attitude slightly does comedy down. I think it's doing comedy a disservice. When you get up there and you're speaking your mind and trying and making it funny, you can influence people, and you can change how people view the world, and you can change how people think. And I think you have to have some responsibility. And I think if you get up and you start just being racist or homophobic, or you just start slagging off or punching down or any of that kind of stuff, I think it's okay for people to be offended by it. And I think you need to take responsibility if you are offensive. And because here's the thing about it, is that in the moment you start saying, well, comedians are allowed to say anything or do anything, then that means that there's no such thing as edgy comedy, because like that laugh you get when you watch somebody like Frankie Boyle or Doug Stanhope or Bill Hicks, that makes you go, oh, that feeling of, oh, I'm not sure if I should be laughing at that. That's gone. The moment you start saying, well, comedians should be able to say anything,
Mm-hmm.
then there's no such thing as dangerous comedy, is there? You know what I mean? So then there's no difference between Frankie Boyle and Michael McIntyre. You know, so I think it's important that there is a line and that you can cross it, because then it makes the people who sort of dance up to the edge of that line, it makes them more interesting. And I'd also say, because you're talking about people being woke, that is one thing that's one reason why you there's limits on what you can and can't say. But people, I think, a lot of time now when they talk about comedy and what you can and can't say, it genuinely, it's not just the woke who are shutting things down. I think what we've seen in America with what happened with Stephen Colbert's show being cancelled and Jimmy Kimmel, you know, and stuff like that, is that the other side of the fence are just as prescriptive about what they'll listen to and what they'll put up with from comedians, and that is one of the saddest things, I think. You know, is that like the thing I've had most people walking out of my shows. The last tour I did, I had a thing about COVID denial. My little brother died, and part of it was complications with COVID that would contribute to death. So I was just saying about, for me personally, I'm up for having a chat about COVID, but the one where I draw the line is denial. And once I get into that bit, I would occasionally have people leave, because they don't want to have, you know, if I'm saying people who deny the existence of COVID can suck the farts from my arse, and occasionally people will get up and go. And if you're slagging off Trump or you're slagging off Nigel Farage, people are just as prone to walking out. So it's a sad thing, but it's both on the left and the right, the progressive and the conservatives. It feels like people are getting less able to laugh at things that are outside their particular political point of view. There we go. You were probably hoping for a shorter answer than that, but that's a hobby horse of mine, that.
Dangerous place if we're going to lose that ability. Bridget, hello. Can you unmute and say hi?
Good evening. Good evening.
Hello.
Hi,
Let's
Bridget.
see.
a couple of things. Well,
Yes.
you mentioned Bill Hicks there. I love Bill Hicks, but I have to say, I don't know if you ever heard his spiel about Barbara Bush's labia. That was the one that I thought, oh, you know.
Was that the read my lips one?
But it was describing the
Right.
what you say, the feature of that lady,
Right.
and not nice,
Right.
but and you have gone and brought that up for me, and I might.
Oh, so I didn't mean that particular routine, but yes, all right, fair enough.
But I was also going to say, you sounded a bit disappointed about the reaction to the silent scream. I suspect a lot of the reason might be because you have. I'm 20 years older than you,
Right.
so
Maybe.
it wasn't around in my day, but it sounds absolutely horrific. And if it was true, fine, but because it was a lie, it's outrageous.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is what, of course, you were saying about, religion being taught in the same way as
Yeah.
mathematics or whatever. Also, you talked about people who influenced you.
Yes.
Well, because you were possibly not even existing or a tiny babe at the time. Dave Allen.
Oh, yeah.
I think you have to applaud Dave Allen and he still stands the test of time. And he was really cutting edge. And to go back to the 18th century, the thing that turned me from being a totally devout, going to mass on a weekday morning, to being an atheist over a period of 2 or 3 weeks was Percy Bysshe Shelley.
All right.
Prometheus Unbound. And the essence of that lyric poem is that what the Abrahamic God is either an egocentric tyrant or, at best, a total incompetence. And he's worth, I tell you, Shelley's worth ploughing if you want some good material. Right, the question I have for you is, would you ever consider becoming an ambassador for the Humanist Association of Ireland? And forget the Brits.
Well, I do live in the UK, so that's why I've hitched my wagon to that particular organisation. But I'd be more than happy to lend my weight and voice to any campaigns that the Humanist Association of Ireland should ever
So
start.
you could be the colossus that strides the Irish Sea.
I sincerely doubt. I think you're definitely talking me up there, but I certainly that I would manage to deliver on that. But on the point about Dave Allen, by the way, no, massive fan of him growing up, and yes, and he was very edgy and very anti-religion and did all stuff about sketches about the Pope and stuff like that. I actually did a documentary about him for Radio 4, which was and I didn't know there was for a while a de facto ban of Dave Allen on RTE. Even though he lived in the UK, was doing stuff with the BBC, couldn't be arsed there. They had well, if he ever tries to get on here, we're not having him, apparently. So I'm sure he lost a lot of sleep over that.
Yes, yeah. But listen, I love your work as well, and thank you for speaking to us tonight.
Thank you, Bridget. Right.
So, Ed, we've gone past our hour, but that's a good sign.
Which is nice. I'm only concerned about my kids are told that they couldn't stream anything until past, and they'll probably be sitting there waiting because they didn't want their Netflix to take up any bandwidth.
They're chomping at the bit for the bandwidth piece. But look, we'll say thank you because that's first bit, and we also always finish with this little piece is we give you the final word. And that's it. So basically, final word, Ed Byrne.
Oh God, you've sprung now. I mean, I thought I was doing all right.
It's our favorite bit.
Yeah,
be excellent. I don't know where it came from, but we just do it. So.
Be excellent to each other and party on, dudes. Sorry, I've just been watching Bill and Ted with the kids, but I do feel like be excellent to each other is a nice twist on a nice secular version of the golden rule.
Cool. Excellent. Well, excellent it is. So again, thank you to everybody for joining. Really appreciate Ed. You know, just absolute pleasure. As I said, you're more than welcome to understand us, and if you're ever over, like, we'd love to have you for an in-person chat, coffee, beer, whatever is tickles your everything. So, Gur Mahagot, thank you, and thanks to everybody for joining.
Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks
much.
a million, Ed. Thank
Bye.
you.
No worries. Bye.